everyone, I'm Krasia Tasio. Professor Popchristov is with me again to speak about the Bogomils. Your first lecture with us, Professor Popchristov, was so interesting that people wrote me and commented they would like to hear again from you. Thank you very much for accepting my invitation and the invitation of so many people which were interested in your amazing lecture. So, Professor Popchristov, please, let's speak again about the Bogomils. Let's speak about the notion of freedom, which is so applicable for the situation nowadays and for the Bogomils. And I will refer to the ones that are listening to us now but haven't seen the first video with Professor Popchristov to go and see it on my channel. The video is really amazing. So hello, Professor Popchristov.
Hello.
Please, I entirely give the word to you.
Well, we were talking last time about the Bogomils, and for those who are going to see this lecture, let's say, for the first time, I will very briefly go back to who the Bogomils were. This is a very special spiritual teaching that started in Bulgaria in the year 927. That's the beginning of the 10th century. The start was given by the youngest son of the Tsar at the time. His name was Boyan the Magician, and he initiated his 21 of his future apostles in this new creed, let's say, which basically is a revival of the so-called apostolic or Christianity, or the original Christianity that was preached by Jesus Christ himself and his immediate apostles. There are certain differences with the creed that we nowadays know, and also is based on the ancient Bulgarian Orphic tradition. So the most important thing that I would like to stress on today is the notion of freedom, because this was the most controversial point that led to a series of attacks on the Bogomils and a whole crusade, the Albigosian crusade, to eradicate this teaching in Europe, because it spread all over. The Bogomils believed that each and every human being is a unique God's son or daughter, which means that each and every human being has the right to have a direct connection with the Creator. It doesn't, he or she doesn't need any special intermediate body between the person and the Creator. And so they believed that the freedom of any dogma is one of the most essential ones. Of course, this led to a series of conflicts with the official church at the time, because basically they wanted to jump over the institution of the church and go directly to God's mind. And they were practicing that very openly, very freely for a certain period of time before the persecution started. But the idea was that each and every human being has something unique within himself that he can offer to the rest of the society. There is no person without special qualities, without special abilities. And in the communes that they were organizing, this was the rule. Each and every person would give the best of himself or herself to the rest of the community. That was the way the Bogomils were overcoming the ego, which was a vital point. And can you imagine what happens in a commune where everybody's equal, nobody's believed to be higher or bigger than anybody else, and everybody gives the best of himself to the rest of the society? So you give the best of yourself, you get the best of everybody else. That was the idea. So no dogmas. People were free to get into the commune, and if they didn't like it, they would step out with no persecutions, no nothing. So just you say, I'm up to here, I don't like this, I get out. Those who were in were supposed to work for, like I said, for the best of the society, but they had a spiritual leader called the Dets, whose authority was based only on his special human and spiritual qualities. There was no structure within the commune. So that was the next point. No structure, no landlords, no leaders, special leaders, no elections, nothing like that. And in that sense, the Bogomils were against also the all possible governmental structures that were putting people in some kind of subordinate position. You're supposed to follow somebody, a governmental clerk or whoever. So no governmental control, no dogmas coming from the church. That was the idea of spiritual freedom, and they were expressing themselves very openly because of what I said. They believed that each and everyone has the right to have a direct connection with God. That was the thing that attracted most people to the Bogomil communities, because everybody wants to be liked. The principle was love, universal love, love based on what they call Jesus's love. So you love your neighbor, you love your enemy, you love everybody else, you love the universe as the best expression of God's mind on earth. So that was these were the two elements: the freedom from dogmas and freedom from governmental structures that attracted people from all layers of society. So this was not a movement that was predominantly for the poor. No such thing. It started actually in the palace. So the first members were the aristocrats, and then it spread out and involved people from all social levels. And the freedom that they had was something that they cherished most. And they were ready to give their lives for that freedom. And they did it practically by going on the stakes and singing psalms and praying to God. But the most characteristic and unique part of this whole theme of Bogomil's freedom is the point that concerns women. Women were considered to be absolutely free and equal to men. And basically, the Bogomils believed that the feminine principle is the most important and creative one. And they put it as number one in this whole process of creation. So they were saying the feminine energy creates the model. Then comes the masculine energy to execute the model with its might, aggression, force, and so on and so forth. But in the end, it's the feminine, the feminine aspect who comes again to put the final touch and create this new thing to be well balanced and very harmonious. And harmony was considered by the Bogomils to be the main goal of this whole creation, because it's created with love. That's the feminine aspect, and whatever is harmonious brings joy and it's beautiful. So beauty and joy was the final idea of this whole creation. So the feminine aspect within the Bogomil teaching was very important and placed, as I said, as number one. From that one followed that women were considered to be absolutely equal to men in society, which is something that is not quite true even nowadays. Meaning that women could take positions of preachers. Women could be they could be involved in all other spiritual activities that the community had. They could be spiritual leaders themselves, which was something that the church did not accept for quite some time. And they were never in a subordinate position, never ever. They could be initiated to the position of the Dedets, which is the spiritual leader of a community. Then they had a very other special function, which was very important. For the Bogomils, education was vitally important. They were saying that education takes you on the right path to God's mind. So within according to some records, that they're not that many, but from the few that we can have access to, it's clear that the Bogomil communities were extremely well educated, and something like 70 to 80% of the members of the communities were well educated, and we're talking 10th, 11th, 12th centuries. So this is something quite important. And the education was very special, where women played the vital part in that. What do I mean? The idea was that each and every human being is unique. So each and every human being has unique qualities and abilities that need to be developed further on. So women were supposed to follow the development of the little kids from babies on, and look for what are the specific things and qualities and abilities that these kids display, and work on developing those. In other words, if one kid is very good at singing, but is very bad with mathematics, don't force him with mathematics. Let him sing. Or the other way around, of course. If one is very good in mathematics but cannot sing, that's okay. Don't force him to sing. So in other words, individual approach to education was something that was very typical for the Bogomil communities, and the kids were developed individually with the idea that eventually they will be part of the commune, and they will have the chance to display and give out the best of themselves and offer it to the rest of the community. So no waste of time for things that the kids are not interested in or display no interest and no abilities in. So this education was something very important and very specific. And the next thing was that each and every human being has the right to take the best of nature, which is the perfect representation of God, in terms of all sorts of herbs and plants that are healing. And the Bogomils believed that each and every creation of God, in this particular case, we're talking about the plants and the herbs, are kind of reservoirs of a specific energy, God's energy, in a combination of which is explained by different color, different root system, different stem system, different smells that all these plants have. But if you know what kind of specific God's energy they carry with them, then you can use it for healing people. So the idea was that to heal a disease, you have to start with the soul. If there is a disease of some sort, there is something wrong going on within yourself, within your spirit. So you have to cure that first and then deal with the rest. And the plants were vitally important for that. So if there is some kind of disbalance within your own human energy, they would know what is it that you need and where to get it, what kind of plants and herbs you can use in order to help restore the balance. So the Bogomils were world famous for being the best healers. And one of them, Vasily Vrach, very famous. Vrach means healer, doctor. He was put on the stakes in Constantinople in the year 1111, on the 11th of November, 11th month. The year was 1111. This was not by chance. It was because all of this we know from Anna Komnene, who was the daughter of the emperor at the time, and wrote a book where she wanted to praise her father. And she was describing the situation when the Bogomil teaching was taking all over Constantinople and going even, as she put it, into the houses of the aristocrats. And at one point, her father was forced to eradicate this whole teaching. And but his father, Alexei Komnin, was very intelligent and smart person, and he loved to have discussions and dialogues with philosophers and wise and people at the time. And for 20 years, he was trying to get in touch with Vasily Vrach and couldn't succeed to get in touch with him at all. But once he did it, he had lots of discussions with Vasily Vrach and they became friends, so to speak. But at one point, the patriarch in Constantinople said to him, forget about it, stop with that. If you want to be an emperor, you have to make a choice between your mother or your friend Vasily Vrach. Why the emperor's mother? Because, to put it in contemporary terms, she was the main sponsor of the Bogomils in Constantinople at the time. So the emperor was forced to make a choice between his mother and his best friend. And of course, he chose his best friend. And in one of these discussions that he organized, he had a very, I'm trying to find to look for a more mild word, but let's put it directly, a very bad conspiracy thing they did. There was a person behind the curtain, Zigavin, also popular figure at the time, who started writing down the whole dialogue that Vasily Vrach and the emperor had. Then went to the patriarch and said, listen, this person has to be put on the stakes, and they put him on the stakes. And this was done in front of a crowd of over 10,000 people at the stadium at the time. And Anna Komnina, in her book, wrote that the moment when Vasily Vrach was put on the stakes, he kind of disappeared. There was only a thin line of smoke coming out, and a very pleasant smell came from the stakes, not of burnt flesh or something like that. And he disappeared like no one had ever seen him. And Vasily Vrach was very popular with this aura of a person who can cure each and every disease, and it was all based on this Bogomil idea that our whole life is interconnected. Plants are plants, but we're connected with them. Animals are animals, but we're connected with them. We are connected with the whole other structure and processes of nature, and this is what God's mind has created. So it's one unity of existence, and we are part of it, and we have to be part of this whole harmony. We have to learn how to get in touch with it, how to be part of it in order to be in touch with God's mind. So this whole idea of universal unity, where the human beings are not the how can I put it, are not so special or more special than the rest of the whole creation, but they're just an integral part of it, is vitally important for the Bogomil teaching. And this is what made it so popular and so appealing to the people from the rest of Europe, because last time I was talking about the spread of the Bogomil teaching, but I will briefly go about it again. From Bulgaria, went to Bosnia, where it became the official religion, to first of all to Italy, then from southern France, Holland, Germany, Poland, Russia, then England, and moved even to America much later on. And the idea of freedom was what a people from the Renaissance found very appealing. And this is why a lot of people are saying that the spiritual basis of the Renaissance is basically the Bogomil teaching, with the idea of total freedom of the human being from dogmas, from governmental structures, and even women should be considered as equal to men and free to go for the on the spiritual path alongside with man, without being kind of second-class citizens. And because of that, the Bogomil teaching, with this idea of universal freedom, kind of spiritually enhanced the development of the Renaissance, later on the Protestant movement, and the spiritual idea is even reflected in the hymn of the European Union nowadays. But that's
Yeah.
What I wanted to say is that the Bogomil teaching is something that is not very well known in Western Europe. People there know mostly about the Cathars and the Albigoians because they are the brothers and sisters of the Bogomil teaching. They started up with them. And but this is a very, very essential spiritual ideas that were not just ideas for the head, but were implemented in everyday life, in these communes, as they put it, where people were free of all sorts of restrictions and could give the best of themselves. So this is a very important message and idea that was first spelled out in the year 1167, when there was in Saint Felix du Caramon in southern France, there was a big council, the Bogomil Cathar meeting, where the Bogomil, the Dets or spiritual leader, his name was Nikita, delivered the speech where he said that Europe should be spiritually united first, and under the ideas of the Bogomil teaching, or following the model of the Bogomil teaching. That was the first time spelled out the idea that Europe should be united and that people are equal everywhere, and there are no distinctions and divisions based on race and gender, social status, whatever else you want to make distinctions between people. All people are equal. All people are God's sons and daughters. They all have access to God's ideas without the necessity of intermediate bodies, and they should be free.
Allow me a question, because now freedom, the notion of freedom, it's always been like the way I hear the freedom was always being chased and persecuted all over the world. Nowadays, when we see also astrologically that the whole world is awakening, the whole world is awakening with amazing speed. It's like day by day, more and more people are awakening, which is so beautiful. But then there is again this persecution of awakening, if you want, and people are locked in their houses, and this is historically always freedom is reaching a certain possibility, and then is being kind of either prosecuted or locked, and then we're entering another stage of lack of freedom. And we, in this way of thinking, are there contemporary Bogomils? Because I know they are, but I know that you know much more, and how you see them in this situation, the contemporary Bogomils, because they're not dead, they have children.
They have children. There are lots of them. Well, if we go now into astrology and a little bit in mysticism, a lot of the Bogomils from that period of time are reborn nowadays. And the idea is that everything in this creation goes in cycles. So things are repeated over and over again on another level. That's important. So this time the level is different. And the current Bogomils are those who are trying to open up this world, to stop going into secrecy, into all sorts of secret societies, sects, and whatever but liberate people from that kind of stress that there is something secret, something very strange that you don't know and you have to be afraid of. So in order to avoid freedom and push it aside, you have to be free. Free from concepts, free from structures, free from dogmas,
Dogma.
so the present day Bogomils, those who believe in that, there are a lot of people like that. They started speaking up, and their voices are heard more and more. And I hope they're going to be even more voicey in future, because this is the path that our human race has to follow. And this situation nowadays, that we're locked in our houses, is a time when everyone has a chance to go deep within himself and follow what the spirit has to tell us, and follow that, because that's the most important thing, and will put us in one big unity of human race, without violence, without hatred, without envy, without all of these negative things that our societies nowadays have produced so far.
I was also thinking why it was allowed by the Creator and by the spirit world, the Bogomils, to be destroyed in such severe way. Sad.
Because they proved to how can I put it? They happened to come too early, in other words, because the rest of the people and the societies were so violent and so primitive that they could not take these ideas that easily, and so the only response was violence, stakes, persecutions, killings, a whole crusade against them, organized by the Pope. So it was just this tremendous aggression against them because they were a little bit too early. But the idea was that they had to to plant it.
So oh yeah.
Afterwards, there will come time when this whole thing has to be
revived, maybe.
Revived, and it will evolve again, and it will come out again, and then comes the harvest.
So they were a bit like victims of victims, casualties of by the spirit world, maybe, because maybe nothing is happening without a reason, right? Nothing is just chaotically arising.
Of course, but they did not think of themselves as victims or martyrs. They were thinking of themselves as enlightened people who have to disseminate these ideas to as many people as they can. And they were going on the stakes singing. They were happy. They were not that much feeling like, oh, we're deprived, we're victims, there's something really bad happening to us. No, they were going there singing Psalm number 21 of David, which is and the only prayer that they used was Our Father. That was the only prayer, and that was them.
Saying this, say please 2 words about this prayer, because I saw a very interesting lecture of yours. You were speaking about the Aramaic Aramaic translation,
Aramaic text, yes.
Aramaic text, which was much longer. What is the difference, and which language used the Bogomils?
Oh, the Bogomils were speaking their native languages, and there were there were translations of the Our Father. I know of 3. One that we know in Bulgaria, which was translated, I guess, from Aramaic in the beginning, and then there is the one in southern France, which is in Provence, in Occitan, and the one in Aramaic. The one in Aramaic is longer because the language is very beautiful. The message is basically the same. The overall message of the prayer is not changed, but there are certain specific details that are really, really endearing and very beautiful and go very deep into your heart. The moment when you listen to them, and or moreover when you have to speak them out, they're so touching. That's a long story. It will take a long time to discuss that, but I published it because it's a good idea that people would know how this whole thing was sounding long time ago.
Can people find it on your Facebook page?
It's only in Bulgarian.
Oh, it's only in Bulgarian. Okay.
In Bulgarian.
That's very interesting. Another thing I wanted to ask you. You mentioned the beginning of the Bogomils, 9th century, and it just crossed my mind. Yes. Sorry?
10th century.
10th century. Approximately at that time was the end of the Babylonian state, imperi. Everything, Babylon was finished by the 9th, 10th centuries. How is this related? Is there some sort of link? Because it's, you can see when we look, indeed this was I think approximately this was the time of the end of the Babylonian Sumerian, before that, with the Babylonian Empire. Is there some sort of link?
But I think the Babylonian Empire was dead long before, because the Persians destroyed Babylonian kingdom first. All these spiritual teachings, let's call them, were interconnected because they all have the same source. And people at that time were communicating. They didn't have smartphones, they didn't have internet and all.
Thanks God for them.
But that doesn't mean that they were not communicating with each other, and ideas were traveling back and forth, east to west, and so on and so forth. And so there's no, it's not a strange thing that people were coming up with similar ideas way far east and way far west, and we're coming up with the same results, and we're thinking in a similar way, expressing it differently and using different terminology and symbols, but basically we're saying the same thing. So yes, that connection was possible.
Yes, and your the trips which you're organizing, I want to get back to this because this is so interesting. When groups organized by you are visiting the places of the Bogomils, of the Cathars, well, there was, again, maybe we can summarize with this interesting story of what you saw. Because I know you had, I heard lecture of yours when you were giving amazing spiritual. You were sharing spiritual events which took place for you. Maybe we can summarize with this. And the last thing that I want to ask you is there some update on this, on the events that you're organizing? Because I would be looking forward to join.
We're following the path that Bogomil teaching had at the time, from Bulgaria to the west and to the east. And we organize these, we call them traveling seminars, because I'm lecturing all the time when we're traveling, going to certain places, examining them, studying them, and experiencing them, which is more important. No, we don't have any updates because we don't know how long this situation will go on. But the moment when there is some light at the end of the tunnel, when this whole coronavirus thing is over, because it will be.
It will be, of course.
It will be. Then we're going to have an update on all the trips that we are organizing.
Yes, they are announced on your Facebook page. People who like to follow, I will place a link. I'm personally following as well, because I find this amazing. In Holland, you said Holland. I live in Belgium, and I found it so interesting. So in Holland, there were also Bogomils. Are there places which you're visiting in Holland where the Bogomils, or in Belgium?
We were planning, but we couldn't. We couldn't. But hopefully, better times are ahead of us, and we can come to Belgium and to Holland.
you said about this invisible, suddenly this beautiful spirit which came once you were in a group, and then suddenly someone came. There was this amazing story that I was inviting you to share maybe. And then someone came and was giving you instructions. This was very interesting. Would you say 2 words about this in France?
That was in Montségur in France. I took my people early morning to the castle because I wanted to avoid all the touristic crowds that will come later on. And once we were there, it was just us, and there was one person standing with a dog, and looked very strange. And somebody joked and said, "Well, that's the guardian of the castle." We started doing our rituals, and when we were done, that person came down and said, "Why are you so late?" And I said, "Excuse me, who are you?" And he said, "My name is Joe." And I said, "Joe, how did you know that we were supposed to be here, that we were coming to tell us that we are late?" And he just did this.
Amazing.
And and then I saw that he was carrying a camera, and I asked him, he asked me, "Would you mind if I show my friends what I just recorded?" And I said, "Let me see, first of all, what you've recorded." And he started on the camera, and I saw that he had recorded our whole ritual. All the words that we were saying were not very readable, but what we were singing was very good, in all the movements that we were doing. And I said, "Okay, whom are you going to show this to?" And he said, "To my friends that are down in the village, but couldn't come." And I said, "Okay," and he disappeared. And then I took my people to the special laboratory that there was at Montségur, and wanted to explain to them how it worked, because it's very much astrologically and astronomically oriented. And once we got there, I was the first one to get in, and I saw a person with a staff, and on it was a pumpkin that was painted white, green, and red, which is the Bulgarian flag. And it was a very strange figure of a man with a mustache like Salvador Dali. And he said, "Why are you so late?"
Again.
Again. And I said, "Excuse me, who are you?" Because we already ran into one person who asked us the same question. "So who are you now?" And he said, "I'm a Belgian, and I live down in the village. And I came here because I knew you were coming." And I said, "Where did you know we were coming from?" And he did the same thing. And then he said, "I'm here to explain to you how this laboratory works." And he did it. And he told us, from this little window and that opening on that day, the sun comes, the whole thing. And we were waiting for the sun to come through one of these openings at 12 o'clock. And at 12 o'clock, the sun came through that very opening. Everybody took the cameras. We started taking photos. And when I looked around, that guy had disappeared. So there are many certain.
Yes, just a miracle. Just one miracle I wanted to hear. Yeah. Very last. Sorry, excuse me.
Some other time we can talk.
Yes, of course. Just I like that we summarize with one of those, because they're amazing miracles. Last question: what the rituals that you're making, are they Bogomilian rituals specifically?
Well, I wouldn't say yes, because nobody really knows how exactly those rituals were looking like. But following the idea that we are free to express ourselves.
Exactly.
The idea of freedom. So we do what we feel we have to do the way we feel it should be done.
Oh, that's wonderful, really. People should not be ruled by dogmas, but just connect with the Creator and do what they feel like.
Yes, and be free.
Be free. Let's summarize with this. Be free, be free. Thank you so much, Professor Popchristov. And this was again amazing. And I hope that you soon accept my invitation again. Thank you so much.
Sure. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.